Live from Brooklyn, welcome to the Sick Podcast, starring Alan Stein, where he steers your career with Kadima. Along with Alan, I'm Russ Reba. Alan, the guest that you're going to be having a conversation with today, Anyel Albury, has had a really cool journey, and she wanted to relocate after connecting with you. I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's true. Anyel was one of my first clients, and she came referred by a mutual friend of ours, and she wanted to get into big tech, and she was open to relocating. So we were able to work together. She successfully landed a fantastic role at Meta, formerly known as Facebook.
Right. Moving to a city she's never been to before. That's pretty exciting. So any other talking points we can expect to look forward to in this episode?
Yeah, so Anyel shares a lot of sick advice here. She's going to be talking to you about the power of referrals. She's going to talk to you about how she pivoted from consulting to a career in tech. She's also going to be sharing about how she effectively deflected the compensation conversation early on in the recruiting process and how that helped benefit her down the road. And she's also going to help you understand how she looked at Facebook, how she prepared for those interviews, and how she did not put all her eggs in that basket. Even though that basket wound up working out great for her, she took a very proactive approach that led to tremendous success for her.
All right, well, this is going to be a good one. And before we get started with it, how have you been? It's been a little while since we chatted. What's been going on with you?
Well, I appreciate you asking, Russ. Just last night, my wife and I went to a concert series right down the block from us, Celebrate Brooklyn. And it was a kickoff of, I think it was the 35th season that this concert series is going on. And my wife and I have been going for 18 years since we've been in the hood. And we've seen some pretty cool concerts in the past.
All right. So is any artists that we would know, or are these up-and-comers?
There's a combination of new artists and up-and-comers, and also established artists. Some of the most memorable shows I went to was seeing Beck there.
Oh, yeah.
We saw Modest Mouse. We saw this awesome Afro-beat, Afro-funk band called Antibalas. It's a 14-piece Afro-funk band.
Oh, wow.
And we saw Willie Nelson there as well. And he put on one of the best shows I've seen. And he stood up the whole time, which is amazing at his age.
Willie Nelson in Brooklyn. I love it. All right, so let's get into the show with Anyel Albury. We'll talk about how she prepared for a somewhat daunting process and how you, Alan, made it easier for her. So let's get into it.
I've known Anyel for about 6 months now. So Anyel and I met through a mutual acquaintance, a colleague that I knew at Google. He put me in touch with Anyel because Anyel was looking to pivot into the tech industry. And Fabian, who was our mutual contact, was nice enough to put us in contact with each other. I got to know Anyel and her phenomenal background, experience, and desire, and also drive, which was impressive. It always impressed me about your drive and desire. And I was like, Anyel will be a fantastic person to work with Kadima and will be successful. So I know you didn't always feel confident about that, but I always knew that you would succeed. And as we'll talk about here a little bit, less than 6 months after getting to know you, you landed a ridiculously good job. And I won't reveal that. I'll let you reveal that. But let me welcome you to where we talk about some witty banter, actionable insights to help other individuals succeed like you have done and are continuing to do. So with that, let me hand it off to you a little bit and introduce yourself, and with the proper pronunciation of your name, please.
Absolutely. So as you guys all know at this point, my name is Anyel Albury, and originally from the Bahamas, made my way to the US through Charlotte, North Carolina, now in Boston, but going over to Austin, Texas very soon for the new opportunity that Alan just mentioned. But super excited to be here today because, my journey was so unique. When I first met Alan, I remembered I sat down and I said, Alan, I have so many places I can go. I have my background in financial services and sales. This is the foundation of what I've done. And then I got into project and program management. So do I go and continue my career in that space? But then as a consultant, I spent some time in supply chain and manufacturing. So do I want to go there? And so over the last few years, I've just been able to really develop a lot of skill sets in a number of different areas. But one of the things that's really resonated with me and that I have an affinity to is also leadership. And so when I think about my background, it's a whole lot of different things that I think really makes me super unique in terms of what I typically can bring to the table for organizations. But at the end of the day, sometimes it can also be complicated. And Alan actually helped me to navigate a lot of it, of really figuring out what I want to do, how I want to get there. And so, just super excited to be here today, talk a little bit about my story, talk a little bit about my job search and my job hunt journey as well, because it's definitely a good one.
Awesome. You're based in Boston. And as you said, you're moving to Austin, Texas. How do you think about location? So I know when we chatted, you were thinking about potentially relocating and how that played into your job search. How did you decide on Austin? What else was in your decision set? And take me through that a little bit.
Oh my gosh. So where to start? So my husband and I, we knew that being in Boston would be a short-term stint. His company brought us here, but we knew we would stay here 2 years, maybe 3 years max. And so we were at the point where it was kind of like, okay, where are we going to go? So when I met Alan, I knew I wanted to move. I knew that wherever I ended up, I wanted to be, in that ideal city. So we had two requirements, one that it was a low cost of living city, and then one that it had moderate weather, because coming from Boston, from the Bahamas, we wanted to be someplace warmer. So that was one of my key criterias, where I really want to be someplace where there's an office. So while I love working from home, I'm one of the people that's pro work from home, but I also like having that balance or the flexibility to be able to go into an office if I want to network, get to meet coworkers, so on and so forth. So with that being said, we thought about Atlanta. So if you remember, Alan, we went there, we looked at apartments, we tried to get a feel for the city, and Atlanta was okay. It didn't give us the warm and fuzzies. So, we were kind of like, maybe we can go there, maybe not. Then we also thought about Texas. So when the door opened for Texas, that opened a whole lot more companies. So at that time, before I was looking at like Microsoft, Salesforce. But then when I thought about Texas, I'm thinking, okay, well, Austin is the tech hub in Texas. And so that means now I can kind of target companies like Facebook as well. So I actually connected with a friend of mine who works at Facebook. She actually works remotely. But when we realized that Texas or Austin would be our, potentially our place to live, definitely opened that open door to Austin being our spot that we're going to end up at. So we'll see how it goes. Funny enough, to everybody's viewing, we've never been to Austin before. So we'll see what that journey is like once we get there.
Great. And you mentioned when we first started chatting in March, you had a few companies in mind that you were considering. You mentioned Microsoft, Salesforce, Facebook. I'd love to hear how you've thought previously about identifying your target companies and how that has evolved over the course of time.
Yeah. So I think at the beginning of the year, I was very intentional about my next move being in tech. And so for me, I knew that tech was an industry that was continuously changing. I also knew that tech was an industry where people who look like me weren't really there much. So I knew that I wanted to work for a tech company. But my background was so diverse, right? Like I've spent time doing cloud implementation, but I've also spent time doing go-to-market strategy to increase sales. So I knew that I could go either option, but I can still do it in tech. In the beginning, I thought, well, maybe I'll stay in like this, the cloud implementation realm. So then that was where I spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, maybe Microsoft, maybe I'll do Salesforce. maybe any company that has some kind of like, or Amazon, like, any SaaS or cloud implementation, maybe that may be where I want to go. But then I thought like, well, I really want to get into strategy. I really want to spend time figuring out how I can help companies grow and make more money. And then hopefully in my small way and my own locus of control, help in a bigger way outside of the company as well. And so that's where Facebook came in. I guess the cat's out of the bag. I kind of mentioned Facebook already, but
yes.
But that's kind of
spoiler alert. Yeah.
So that's where Facebook ended up coming in, because in this role, it was giving me that opportunity to get into a strategic mindset, or at least go back into that strategic mindset. And it was giving me an opportunity to make a big impact in such a big money-making part of the company, but then also helping small to medium businesses as well. So it kind of shifted the way I looked at things. And the great part about these tech companies is that there's something for everyone. If you're in HR, you can still do HR and tech. If you're in legal, you can still do legal and tech. It's just a place where anybody can be and anybody can make impact. And so in the beginning, I was kind of thinking a little narrowly, but then afterwards I started thinking a lot bigger, and I realized that there was a place for me for sure.
And you mentioned in there, as you were thinking about moving into tech, that it was a place that may not have a lot of people that look like you as a Black woman. Facebook has 3.9% of their employee base are Black. Mm-hmm. And that's actually on the high side. Yep. Salesforce, where I'm at, is 3.4%. I think Google's at 3.8 or 4%. Everybody's meandering around this low single digits, even though the US population is, I think, 13.4% Black. Talk to me a little bit about how you think through that. How different is it from where you have been in your past? And talk a little bit about your past roles. You're at TIA, you're at some consulting organizations. How was the experience being Black there? And how do you think it's going to change, improve, be different going into Facebook, where all these tech companies talk a big game?
Yeah.
The numbers are yet to bear it out.
For sure. I mean, what's funny is you see on the websites, on the career sites, on any type of courses that these companies offer, you have Black people on there, and you almost sit down wondering, like, do they really work there? Or it's just like a picture they bought, online, because what's really there isn't accurate. Right. So for me, in my journey, in my career journey, I've always been in male dominated industries, and I've always typically been one of, or the only Black person on the team, or my last company in the entire company. So with that being said, in the last couple of years, I've really reflected on the way that Black people are looked at in the world, one, but then especially in the US. And coming from a country where, most people do look like me for the most part, although there's still diversity there. But at the end of the day, most people look like me. And then coming into a world where not so much, right? As I move up further in my career, everybody started to get whiter and I started to feel Blacker, right? And so I knew that wherever I ended up, that's just my reality and that's fine. But I also felt like I now had a duty to do something about it. So at this point in my career, I knew that tech is an uphill battle. One, my network is in tech. My network is financial services, right? And then also two, I knew that there's just not a lot of people that look like me. So when I have interviews, I wonder if they have unconscious bias. All of these things are things that I think about, on a daily basis as I try to knock down the doors in the tech industry. And so for me, my goal, and something that I just never thought about in TIAA, there's always, diversity and inclusion. There's a whole team that figures all this stuff out. We had a Black CEO. So, I felt like things were sort of handled, and I had, Black coworkers here and there. In my current company right now, at least the one that I just left, nothing was set into place. So I knew that in the season that I was in, that was my place. It was my place to be the person doing recruiting, to speak up when, maybe we've only hired a bunch of, Caucasian people, or it's my place to maybe set more diversity and inclusion guiding principles. But now in tech, I want to be able to marry both of those. I know that there's going to be a whole diversity inclusion team, all kinds of things, but I have to make sure that wherever I end up, whatever affinity group or ERG that I end up, I am making a change within my own locus of control. But I have to be very intentional not to get too comfortable, not to get there and be like, all right, I'm here. Like, forget everybody else. I'm good. But more so make sure that I'm bringing people along with me the best that I can. And I think that has been something that has shifted my mindset from 2012, when I started my career, up until 2021, where I'm now entering a new world. It's just really being accountable for that.
And you mentioned ERGs, which for our listeners, employee resource groups. And these are groups that are either affinity based around gender or race or religion. So at Google, I was part of the Greglers, which were old Googlers, anyone over 40. And I was part of Juglers, which were the Jewish Googlers. But I was also part of BGN, which is the Black Google Network. So you can join any of them. And it was actually interesting. And I met lots of good people through that. Have any of your former organizations had ERGs?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So TIAA had a ton. So they were really good about creating spaces for underrepresented groups to be together, but then also for people like yourself who tend to be allies to also spend time in this group to understand and to learn. So they were actually really good. That was kind of where I got the exposure and I realized that's how it should be done. And so when I went to my company that I just left, awesome company, everyone literally are amazing people. And the great part about this company is that they knew that's something that they wanted to get better at. So they actually invited the conversation of like, how can we try to be better? And so this was my opportunity to start a kind of a woman's ERG or employee resource group. And it was small because it's a very small company. But this is really where I had that opportunity to pour into the women that tend to be underrepresented a lot of times in consulting, and hopefully to empower them to do the same wherever they end up in their careers. Going forward, I'm sure there's going to be things that are established, but I think it'll be up to me to try to make it bigger and better.
Great. So you got this awesome job at Facebook. Talk to me a little bit about what your role is, what you're going to be doing at Facebook.
Yeah. So I'll be a strategic program manager, and I'm going to be working in the small to medium business space. And so as you guys all know, Facebook's number one revenue maker is through ads. And so I'll be working on ways of obviously increasing revenue through the ad space for small to medium businesses, but not only helping Facebook make more money, but then also helping small to medium businesses be able to leverage the tools to be able to do more with their businesses. But it'll be across the 3 platforms of Facebook, Instagram, and also WhatsApp, which was so cool because one of the things that I wanted to do wherever I ended up, whatever tech firm I ended up on, I wanted to work for a company of whose products I actually utilize. And so for me, I know so many small to medium business owners who use Facebook, and I'm on the tool all the time. So for me, it's just, I'm going to be able to see my why every single day as I'm in the role. So that gets me pretty excited about it.
Which companies did you interview with outside of Facebook? So Facebook, let's say it's your top choice because that's where you're heading. So let's just pretend that that's your top choice. But how long has your job search been, and which companies were in your consideration set and why?
Overall, the job search was 8 months. So started off, I had an interview with Amazon. That one was interesting, right? Like I was just at a point where I'm like, oh, like Amazon seems like a cool company. I mean, I use Amazon Prime, but I don't know anything else about actually working there. And so I connected with a friend of mine who I went to undergrad with at UNC Charlotte. And I'm like, hey, I see you work at Amazon. I'd love to learn more about the company. I don't really want to apply to roles right now, but I just want to get an understanding of what it's like there. What are things you like and dislike, so on and so forth. And so after talking with her, for her, it was kind of like, hey, like after hearing about your background, I think you'd be a really great fit for Amazon. I'll put in a referral. And so somehow, some way ended up interviewing at Amazon. But that one was just not for me. That one at the end of the day, in hindsight, it's funny because hindsight's 2020. At the time, I was like all about it, right? But they also wanted me to move to Seattle. I had no interest in moving to Seattle. And there was something else about it that was like, I don't know. Oh, it was kind of getting into their retail for Amazon Canada, which I thought was pretty cool, but it would also kind of put me in a small box for retail. And at the time, I was just like, whatever, it's Amazon. I'll figure it out once I get in. But then in hindsight, I think getting over would have been the best career move. So, that door was closed for me. And that was great in hindsight. At the time, it sucked because I interviewed with them like the day after my birthday. So my whole birthday, I spent, literally prepping. And then after that, I took a break. Things were going pretty good at my company. I really enjoyed it, my clients. And I just was like, you know what? I'm good. I'll just wait it out and see what happens. And that's fine. A few months go by, and one of my friends who I went to Wake Forest, she had referred me to a role at Salesforce. I just recently started working at Salesforce, loved the company so much. I was like, oh my God, Anya, you got to come. So she referred me to a role in Salesforce. And this role was super, super analytical, very data crunching. And I was going to do it because I knew at the end of the day, I really wanted to get more and more into strategy. And I knew this would be a great stepping stone, but I knew I would hate it the whole time, right? I knew that for me, my sweet spot is where I'm taking data and I'm making strategic decisions from it, not necessarily crunching data and giving it to somebody else to make decisions from it. So that wasn't really what I wanted to do. But for me, it was just like, maybe it's a stepping stone, I'll figure it out. Made it all the way to the final round. Similarly with Amazon, didn't get it. Then I think that's when I met you. So at this point, I'm like, you know what? I am serious about this, this tech thing. I'm going to really get in there. The more and more, it's funny, the more I got rejected, the more I got hungry for it. And so I had reached out to Fabian, who worked at Google at the time. Once again, same thing, like not necessarily saying like I got to work at Google, but like, tell me about it and tell me how you even got it. Like I knew he had gotten an internship there from undergrad, but like, just tell me what it's been like. And then that was when he told me about you. So he was like, I know a guy who is awesome. He's actually been very focused about getting people of color into tech. And I think he'd be a great person for you to get to know. Long story short, Alan and I met. I think from there, it was pretty much game on because you didn't let up. Anytime I was like, well, maybe things are going okay at my company. Maybe I'll pause. You were like, no, let's continue. Let's keep going. And so there was no stopping from there. So I think we had TikTok, where it's funny because the role is very similar to what TikTok was looking for. But TikTok wanted me to come in already.
TikTok was similar to the Facebook role. Yeah.
But they wanted me to already come in like with all the knowledge of like small to medium business and like already like having the keys to success. Whereas Facebook was more like, we want you to bring your awesome self in and we'll teach you all of that stuff, but like bring your skill sets in because that's really what we need. And so that was really where Facebook really showed itself out because it didn't need me to be an expert at small to medium businesses. It more so wanted me to be myself, come in and be smart, and you'll just learn all the small to medium business stuff once you get there. And I thought that was cool. So I interviewed with TikTok, didn't get that. All of these roles, if you remember, Alan, I kept getting all the way to the final round. And they kept throwing in these case studies. So a lot of times recruiters weren't telling me that I was getting a case study until I got to the interview. And then like, all right, here's your case. So it was always like through left field, I was getting, random case studies. But I can't remember what else. There's definitely more. There's one more, I feel like, or two more in there.
Did you interview with Google at all during that time?
No, we never did Google, but we did apply. There's definitely one more in there that I'm forgetting, but all of which there was something about it that was just like, I don't know. Like one of them wasn't paying enough. Like one of them was just like, okay. One of them wasn't providing relocation. One of them wanted me to be in the city they didn't want to be in. Like there was always something weird about one of them. Whereas like Facebook was the only one that was checking all of the boxes. So it's just crazy because I felt like the journey that I took was leading me to this, but I had to prepare. I had to get better. I had to go through rejection. I had to be able to get on podcasts like this and talk about it and help others through this whole process as well and talk with you about it and refer people to you. All of this happened for a reason, I think. But in the moment, no one saw the good, bad, and the ugly other than Alan.
Well, it was all you. Like, you were prepared, you did the hard work. And also you mentioned something about how you got these roles. So you talked about Amazon through a referral, Salesforce through a referral, TikTok. I think that was my referral that I put you in contact with someone. Facebook, how do you get in consideration referral there too? And that's something that I really try to push for people, because I think people realize this, but about 30% of the consideration set of who the recruiter will talk to come through the employee referrals.
Oh, I thought it was 70.
I think it's 70% that might get talked to, but I think 30% of the mix of applicants are referrals, and it differs by company. And unfortunately, that is one of the core aspects that hinders the diversity also, because white dudes know white dudes and Black women know Black women. So thinking about your referral at Amazon and Salesforce and Facebook, how did you know those three individuals?
So Amazon came from an undergrad colleague. We were both in that organization called Alpha Kappa Psi, which is a business fraternity. And then Salesforce came from one of my closest friends. I was in her wedding in April. We went to graduate school at Wake Forest together. But again, these were all schools that were mostly white, that I just happened to be one of the few Black people in school. So I happened to get to know my white colleagues who were already in these companies. However, and then you obviously you're Caucasian. You introduced me to
It's you white dude.
Yeah, your colleague at TikTok. I feel like we are really missing one, but I cannot remember what it is at the top of my head for some reason. But anyway, and then funny enough, though, Facebook's referral came from a Black girl. Ain't that funny?
Yeah, interesting. Well, you were also interviewing with Fidelity, not in the tech space. You were talking to them. I'm trying to look in our notes of who else you chatted with, but I know you were chatting with several people at different areas. I think you chatted with Microsoft at some point.
Yeah. Then we had Slalom, which was the consulting firm, which loved them. Actually ended up getting an offer with them. I chose Facebook over them, but I mean, they were also pretty awesome. But that one actually came from LinkedIn, a LinkedIn recruiter, which also comes from being intentional about your LinkedIn profile as well. But that's another story.
Well, talk about that. So Slalom, in that case, that was an opportunity that you got an offer at, and you got to offer similar time to Facebook. And we'll talk about your thought process between those two. But so they reached out to you on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So that one came from LinkedIn. It was actually the Slalom Boston. And I don't know if this is like frowned upon, but I was pretty transparent. I knew that we wanted to move. And I just didn't want to waste her time. And I actually think she respected me for that, of just like being very straight up with like, this sounds really great, but I also me and my husband want to move to Texas. I would hate to go through this whole entire process, get your hopes up, and then I up and move, or, it's not for me and I just don't accept it. So she ended up putting me in contact with a colleague of hers in Austin. And so it was kind of history from there. We went on with the interview process and ended up getting that role maybe about a week and a half or two before Facebook, maybe a week and a half before Facebook or so. So that was pretty tough because I actually liked both companies.
Yeah. So with Facebook, so you had a friend of yours that put you in as a referral for Facebook? And then take me through the process of what happened on the interview. So after the referral, what happened next?
Yeah. So after she put in the referral, obviously have your screening call with the recruiter, and then you go through a series of.
So talk about the screening call. So it's a 30-minute call. And what's the recruiter asking you? How did you prepare for that?
So the screening calls for Facebook were very similar to those everywhere else in terms of, why Facebook, tell me a little bit about yourself, obviously giving you a little bit more of a background of the role, and then kind of gauging kind of where you're at in terms of compensation. So pretty standard, nothing earth shattering. And all of these things are on like Glassdoor. So they're not reinventing the wheel. They're pretty standard on what they're going to be asking. And so that one, the recruiter was awesome. I mean, super transparent, like this is what it is, here's what to expect. And, at the end of the call, it's definitely moving you on to the next round. I mean, that was probably one of my favorite recruiter experiences because of the transparency. There was no hiding salary range, or it didn't feel like I was being haggled. And I had experienced a number of different recruiter, experiences. And so that one was probably one of the better ones for sure.
How do you think about having that compensation conversation? So you took a nice boost up from going from your former role to Facebook. But how did you think about going into that conversation? What cards did you reveal, and what did you let the recruiter was a woman?
So yeah, she was a woman.
What did you like? How did you navigate that conversation?
Yeah. So every recruiter wants to just know, is this really worthwhile? Like, do you really they know what they want to pay, but they just need to make sure that whatever they want to pay, you're cool with, because they don't want to waste time. And also I don't want to waste time either. So it obviously we're all aligned to this need. However, one of the main things for me was just not telling them what my number was in the beginning. Every recruiter I've ever talked to will ask, what's your expectation in terms of compensation? And my question back has always been, what's budgeted? And I'll let you know if I'm okay with that. And to be honest, I'm pretty sure they're used to that. They know that it's probably better for the person that they kind of give the range rather than the person giving the range, but they're going to ask anyway. And so for me, it's always just trying to understand what their range is so that I can then be able to determine if it's the best fit for me or not. So I've had situations where the compensation didn't move further than that because the compensation wasn't high enough. And then I've had those where the range was fine. I knew I probably needed a little bit more. But one of the cool things about many recruiters is that they'll tell you it's open for negotiation, that there could be more on the table. And so that also helps to determine whether you want to move forward to the next step. But it's really not until the end where you kind of put your cards on the table. And I feel like that's a very the last smidge, or you just either at the very last smidge or not ever, I feel like.
Yeah. So when they gave you that range, thinking back to that range versus what you ultimately settled on, what was the number you settled? You don't need to share the exact numbers, but.
Yeah, I think I got about 15K more base and that was just.
Then the range that they initially told you in that first call.
Yeah.
And that's a critical factor. So once you get past the recruiter screen, and we'll talk a little bit about the loop, usually it goes recruiter screen. And I think in this case, it went recruiter screen, hiring manager, which is a 30 to 45 minute call. And then you go to the full loops, usually 4 people for 45 minutes. And then you get to the offer. So once you get to the offer stage, that means that the company wants you. So right then you have leverage, you have hand. Mm-hmm. So did the offer that they made you initially, was that the offer that you settled on, or did you negotiate with them at all?
No, I did negotiate. So
you did or did not?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely did. Actually, this is where Alan really helped me because, it's so.
You can say you can say me. I'm right here. You don't have to use me in the third party.
Yeah. You helped me. But you can get so excited about it and just be like, whatever, what they offered me when I got the job was still pretty good. And so you're always tempted to be like, okay. But I feel like, especially for people of color, especially for women, we are susceptible to just saying okay and not countering. And I think the biggest thing that you and I talked about is these people are always going to give you the lowest that they want to give. And it's up to you to see how much more you can get. And so with knowing that, also the fact that I also had another offer gave me a little bit more bargaining power and negotiation power to ask for more because they knew that I had another offer at this point. It took a while for them to make the decision because they had a lot of internal stuff going on. And so it ended up delaying it weeks. So at this point, they knew that, okay, this girl has another offer and we need to hurry to get back to her because she can walk. So that helped a lot in terms of my negotiation because they did know that something else was on the table for me.
Yeah. In your case, I think you got the slalom offer about a week earlier than the Facebook offer or something in that ballpark. And talk to me a little bit about how we work those two offers. So the slalom offer came sooner. Mm-hmm. And they were pressing you a little bit for a decision. and you were kind of holding out for Facebook because I think they had told you a couple of times that we'll get you a decision by this date, and they kept pushing it out.
Yeah.
So how did you navigate that? Because in your mind, like I know you and I talked about it, Facebook was your top choice of the two. Basically. And so how did you navigate that? You had a bird in the hand with Slalom, but you were still going for something that was like your dream job.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is appropriate for everyone, but what happened to me was I was very transparent with the recruiter at Slalom. I explained I have another offer that I'm expecting. And so while this is great, and at this time, I also had been negotiating with them as well, because I knew what Facebook was going to offer me. I knew what my worth was at this point. So I also was negotiating with them because I didn't know if Facebook was going to do or not, right? So at this point, let's just say at this point, I had already gone through their negotiations. I already knew their final offer was. I was very clear on I'm moving to Austin and I'm interviewing for other companies. And that's not a secret. And so I want to take some time to really go through and analyze all of the offers that I'm going to get or that I have before making a final decision. And so surprisingly, they were very understanding. And in my particular case, they were very much like, let us know. And they weren't pressing me like, you got to have this done by Tuesday. I think if they had done that, that would have made things very difficult for me. But they didn't, which was great. They were very much like, we totally get it. We understand this is a big decision. And so just, get back to us. But I think the key for me was just keeping communication open. If I said I was going to follow up on Friday, follow up on Friday and just remain or just continue to have good rapport with them. And that was just what I did during this process of waiting. And it was painful, right, Alan? Like, how painful it was because it's just like, I just want to just say yeah and just move on. But then it was also the thought of, I don't want to say yes. And then Facebook comes through. And this is my dream company, right? Like I really wanted to work here. Right? This is really where I poured my heart and soul into preparing. And then I get it. And then I write to another company, yes. So that was what I did not want to happen.
Yeah. So you had the recruiter screen that was talking about compensation, location, the high level overview of the role. Talk about the hiring manager interview. What was that like? And was it a he or she? And it was a woman, I believe?
Oh, at Facebook, it was a he. And then all of them was a she. But we're talking about Facebook, right?
Yeah, Facebook. So what was that first interview like? What was he asking you? And what were you assessing him on in that first? There was like a 45-minute manager screen or a 30-minute hiring manager screen?
So that, honestly, he was awesome. I actually think he was one of the, like when I walked away from it, I walked away with I could definitely work for him. He didn't spend the entire time grilling me or drilling me. He spent the time getting to know me. At the end of the day, I'd be somebody he'd be reporting with.
You'd be reporting to him, yeah.
Somebody who obviously he'd like to connect with. And so it's like he was very intentional about spending a significant amount of time getting to know me, which is actually a breath of fresh air coming from all the rest of the interviews, because it was just completely opposite. I don't think I could say the exact questions that I was asked because of the NDAs, but in that particular interview, I really just felt a human connection. And that human connection was what made me feel more connected to the company itself. So actually the hiring manager's interview was one of my favorite ones. The other ones were pretty challenging because I got tested on a number of different things like case studies and all of that, which actually more case studies than I even expected. But with him, it was just more like, let's talk about life. But then also let me ask you a few questions too before we end this call. And so that made the call a lot more enjoyable. And that's not always going to happen. That's the first time I've ever really experienced that, at least to that extent. Although, I'm really good. I think in general, I'm pretty good at connecting with people. But I think to that extent, he was definitely more like, I also want to connect with you too, which was great.
So you met with him first and then you had the loops with 4 people, including him?
No, he was actually my second to last interview.
But after the recruiter screen, then you met with the hiring manager or you didn't?
No.
Oh, it went from recruiter right to the loops of the 4 people?
No. So there was I had to do one interview that was basically my ticket to entry.
That was with the recruiter?
No. So I had the recruiter call.
Okay.
Then if I did well on the recruiter call, then I was eligible to go into this interview. That was almost my ticket to entry to the loops. So I wasn't guaranteed to go to the loops. It was kind of like, if you pass this test, basically, then you can move on to the next round. And then I think, everybody goes through this and they probably narrow it down, I don't know, maybe to like 10 people, maybe 9. And then those people go into the loops.
Got it. So it went recruiter to this other person and then to loops of 4 people?
Yes.
And the 4 people, that's the first time you met the hiring manager?
And that was the first time I met the hiring manager, yeah.
Got it. Okay. And what sort of questions were you asking the people, and like, what were you assessing? So you were really excited about Facebook. You were excited about the location. It turned out you were excited about the compensation. But what were some of the questions that you were asking the 4 people in the loops or in your consideration set?
So one of the main things that I've noticed is that a number of people on my team left Google to go to Facebook. And Google was a company that I was also looking at too, to interview and start working there as well, hopefully. So my number one question for 1 or 2 of them was, why did you leave Google to go to Facebook? Like, why? What is it? Like, what do I need to know? So that was one of my questions. The second question that I need to know is, you think about the perfect candidate. Like, what are the qualities that this person has and what do they need to possess to be successful in the role? Because I need to know, 1, do I even have these qualities that they're looking for? But then also 2, to make sure that when I speak, especially when I get to the next rounds, I'm able to really bring up and speak about those skill sets. So they're saying that we really want somebody with good organizational skills, which never was one of the things they said, but let's just say we want somebody with great organizational skills. Well, I know I have great organizational skills, so I'm going to make sure I talk about that in the next round because that's something I know I have and I know it's important. So I'm going to talk about it. So it was really important for me to kind of take inventory of what they thought good looked like in terms of perfect candidate. So that was key for me. I think I asked that definitely with the hiring manager and maybe with 1 or 2 other colleagues. The third thing is I want to know if I'm talking with somebody that's a business partner, I want to know what makes a good business partner because I want to make sure you can picture working with me. I want to make sure that you know that if I become a colleague of yours or a business partner of yours, that me and you are going to kill it. And we're going to do such a great job. I'm going to be a great person. I'm going to be easy to work with. And I'm a team player. And that was really important. And so in my questions, I'm asking, what do you look for in a business partner? And that way I can kind of hear like what they dislike and what they like. And I could be able to determine which bucket I fall into. And I think, I think the standard of like, what's the culture like? Sometimes that's my last question at times. Like if there's time, I'll ask that because oftentimes I can kind of get a vibe of the culture from maybe the first 1 or 2 interviews. And I don't want to spend precious time with everybody else asking the same culture question when there's so many other things that I could be finding out. So I will probably ask a culture question to 1 person, and it could probably be somebody that's on my direct team, somebody who I know would give, if I'm getting a good buy from them, then somebody who I know who will give me the real. That's the kind of person I'll ask the culture question to. For hiring managers, I want to know what's their management style. Like if they're like, I'm a micromanager through and through, that's telling me that I am out.
I've yet to find someone that admits that. There's plenty of people that are micromanagers. I have yet to find someone that says that they are a micromanager.
Yes, nobody admits it. But what it did tell me, like one of the things that my new manager said to me was one of the things that he cares about is somebody who, when they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. And so, and normally everybody that I've asked that question to normally say I'm hands off, that's a standard, which is great for me because for me, I do better when I'm trusted and I have autonomy and I'm empowered. So any leader that tells me that they want to do just that, I know I will thrive with. But if you tell me like some of your quirks are, I want to make sure that if you tell me you're going to get something to me on Wednesday and that you're going to do it, then I know that when I start on Monday, that's front of mind for me. Like the interview doesn't stop for me when I get the job. It's something that I want in the first 90 days to make sure that I'm doing well. So it's still important for me to take stock of the things that he needs or wants in his employee to make sure that I'm doing a good job too.
Yeah, that's a great point. So you got this great job. You're excited about it. It ended fantastically, your story. Looking back, do you think the time that you spent looking for your role was too long, too short, that just the right period of time? So it took you about, like, I think 5 months of us working together. And I think you worked a couple months prior to us working together. Like, I know working with you, it felt long during the time, but looking back on it, that 8-month process, too long, too short, as expected, more than expected, less than expected?
It depends. I'm going to give you the consulting answer to that, because the reason why it depends is because in my particular case, I felt like I just want to hurry up and get to the finish line. I'm tired of the rejection. The thing is that I am applying to companies where the interview process is cumbersome and it takes time and effort. And so when I didn't get it, it just felt like I was starting all the way over from scratch. That feeling was not fun at all. But however, for me, I was also working a full-time job, and I had a couple stints where I was working like 40, 50, sometimes almost 60 hours a week. And so I remember, Alan, like you and I were talking, and I'm just like, I feel like I don't have time.
And you were doing another like side gig at the time too.
I took on like another second job. I was helping a colleague of mine at another gym. And so I was like I was waking up 4:00 in the morning to like 8:30. I was doing this side thing, coming and doing my full-time job. And then any free time I had, I was spending it to my job search. So it felt like I did not have time. So I entered a world of like, I just want it to end. I just need it to end. I just need to get a job so this could finally end. So it definitely in the moment felt very long. And I don't know, maybe it was long. Some people on LinkedIn are like, yeah, I looked for like a week and then, but then most of us, like I've heard people say like, they've applied to Facebook for like 3 years before they finally got onto Facebook. So it just really depends for sure. I think in my particular case, because I had so many ebbs and flows with my job in terms of the hours that I was working, I had taken on a second gig that was taking on a lot of time, all while making sure that I was paying a lot of attention to this and being a good wife and being a good friend and, all the things. And yeah, I definitely felt like it was taking forever. But in hindsight, I think it was just right.
Yeah. And I know when I was working with you, I felt bad for you because it's painful going through it. I've been there. I think when you and I initiated our relationship together, I probably told you 3 to 6 months, and you got it like within 5 months. So 3 to 6 months, I find to be the normal period of time because recruiting is inefficient. And there were a couple of roles that you made it the final rounds and you kicked ass and you were just competing with people that you didn't know. Sometimes it wasn't the right fit, whatever, but you got to throw a lot of shit against the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time now. I'm like, a really wise person told me that this is all you got to do. And it works at the end of the day.
And honestly with you, like if anything, I was probably pushing you for putting more stuff out there. And you, to your credit, you were like, hey, I'm going to be a little bit more focused and a little bit more concentrated for my top choices. And it worked out well for you because you interviewed well, you prepped well, and you practiced well. And we reviewed the process before you knew the role going in well, and you came in confident.
But I think that's also like where it depends too, right? Like, for some people, that formula does work. In my particular case, I knew it would probably give me an anxiety attack if I had done it that way. And then also, too, like I was very targeted on, a handful of companies. And, there have gotten times where like, I was like, well, let me just throw something else out there and like Fidelity. Like I knew I didn't want to go back into financial services. That was just not my jam anymore. At least, I don't know, maybe it is. But I was on a different trajectory at this point. And so I think I had told you like, yeah, I'm just going to apply to Fidelity and see what happens. And I think we both were just like, oh, whatever. Like, let's just see what happens.
I think that was a strategic one because I think when we were talking about that, you were like, semi-interested. And I think what I said is use it as practice.
Yeah.
If nothing else, it's a low pressure one and you can see what happens.
Yeah. But I will say one thing that I learned in this job search thing, in hindsight, which I've said hindsight so many times because in the moment, you really don't notice it. But actually, when it comes to tech, sometimes it can be a little bit easier than other companies because they give you the formula. They tell you, we're going to ask you behavioral questions. use STAR method. You may or may not get some case studies. Sometimes I don't tell you that though. You're going to have like a screening call, and then you're going to have 5 loops. Like they kind of give you the formula. And really, the more you do it, the more you get good at it. And eventually you'll score. Like you just got to change up the formula a little bit, tweak it, and then make it better. And then, and then you're good. But when you go to like these other companies like Fidelity, for example, the interview was so different. I had gotten so accustomed to interviewing for tech where I could give you an example for anything you ask me. If you ask me, how do I put up a curtain? I can tell you, here's an example of when I put the last curtain. Whereas in Fidelity or any other company, I don't want to just call it Fidelity, but in some companies, you have no idea who the interviewer is. You have no idea if they're good at interviewing or if they've ever interviewed before. So they can ask you off the wall questions that you really have no idea what the hell to do with. And so I found that interviewing for tech became easier for me by the end of it than when I would interview for like other random companies.
Yeah, I agree. I think the big tech companies that are hiring machines, like a Facebook, like Amazon, like a Microsoft, like a Google, where they're hiring, I think they have thousands of jobs open. They have a formula and they're trying to convert people. So like I have interviewed with smaller tech companies, so I don't think it's necessarily tech that conveys information well, but I think these large tech companies that need to hire 5, 8, 15,000 people in a year, they call it people operations because it is operation. And they want to prepare the candidates so that they can get people through, because our recruiter was gold on how many people they hire and how quickly they hire them. So they don't want to waste their time. It's really, they don't really give a shit about wasting your time. Like they always talk about the candidate experience. How many surveys did you get as a candidate from interviewing?
I definitely got them from Amazon and Facebook. Facebook's interview process and the technology behind it was the best out of all. Very great. I mean, at Domino's where they tell you when the pizza's in the oven and then when they're putting on all toppings, just like that. I mean, it's just, you can thank all the interviewers on a system. You don't have to get their emails or anything like that. Like, it was just like, wow, this is nice.
Yeah.
And then, you get to some other ones and, the recruiter may forget to even get back to you half the time. So yeah, definitely Facebook, I can tell, and Amazon were very intentional about the experience and like wanting to get feedback. I don't really remember if the others did. TikTok definitely didn't. I don't think. I'm not sure if sales at this point is a blur, but I do remember the first one and the last one did.
Yeah. So I've interviewed at Facebook. I've interviewed at Salesforce, at Google. I can tell you, Google does a great job at it. Facebook does a pretty damn good job at it. And they've built their own technologies as well on top of the ATS, application tracking software. And they are machines because they need to hire people like crazy. So they do a good job. And interestingly, Salesforce, even though they are hiring a shit ton of people, because of the ATS that they use, and they happen to use Workday, they don't treat it like the same operational program and machine that Amazon and a Facebook and a Google do. But even with Facebook, I think there were times where you had to follow up with a recruiter.
Yeah, I did.
It was no fault of the recruiter. And my hunch is there were probably internal things going on, or they're juggling multiple different candidates, or they're trying to get the candidates at a different stage. And to get, like, they're managing people, like you were interviewing over the summer also. So people might have been on vacation.
Yeah, that was it. It was vacation, sick days. I mean, when one person came in from vacation, the other person went out. Like, it was like the worst time. I mean, I don't want to say the word.
From your perspective and talking to you, it was painful. And you're like, Alan, they said they're going to call me by Wednesday and it's Thursday. What do I do?
Yeah, I think like if you remember at one point, I was like, I probably didn't get it. Like, they probably went with their first choice and, they're just like forgetting to like tell me I didn't get it or whatever. Like, I think like I had like come up with the worst case scenario. And then by the end of it, they were like, no, like literally people just were on PTO.
Yeah. And the truth is, a recruiter is looking to fill 30 roles, maybe simultaneously, working with maybe 10 or 15 different hiring managers. So you are, even though you don't feel like it, you're a number on that recruiter's list. And he, in this case, is trying to fill so many roles, and you're just a cog. And there are 4 other people that were probably competing for that role. And while he might have been pleasant to you, he probably didn't care if you got it versus the other 4 people that were competing for it.
Well, actually, it was a she. And
she
did tell me, well, I mean, I don't know if it was true or not, but I'm going to take it as truth. She said that she was rooting for me the most. She said that I had very positive vibes.
That's good. Awesome.
So, positive vibes are paying off.
Yeah. So we have a couple minutes left. Let me just go to a couple of my rapid fire questions that I typically ask people. So we talked a lot about recruiting here, and it's awesome to hear your success stories. In general, how do you, what drives you, what motivates you, what inspires you, whether it's podcasts, whether it's books, whether it's inspirational people? What are some things that have given you motivation and drive throughout your career?
Yeah, inspirational people. I mean, I probably should be reading more books. I read slow, so I just lose interest halfway through a lot of times. So a lot of it is people, like learning people's journey. I love to follow different people on LinkedIn. I like to understand how do people get successful, because I'm the type of person I like to learn from other people's mistakes and other people's successes. And so if I can learn all the things that you did that got you there, I'm sure about certain things that can work for me, I can also get there too. So I think there's just certain people that I just try to get an understanding of what they do, what they enjoy. And that can come through their LinkedIn post. That can come through informational interviews, and just kind of aligning myself to people that are going in the direction I'm going into, and just feeding off of that.
Are there any people that you can think of off the top of your head that are particular people you follow or that inspire you or that you?
Yeah. Just recently, I started talking to this guy named Reese. He's a partner at Deloitte. Now, granted, he's doing nothing that I'm interested in doing. He is in auditing, nothing that I'm interested in, have no interest in. Probably going, I don't know if I'm ever wanting to go back into consulting, we'll see. But he's challenged me so much in terms of networking, in terms of what I'm reading. Just like you, one of the things that attracted me to you was that you gave me reality checks all the time. Like, you're like, yeah, that's not enough. Try again all the time. And he does the same exact thing. So just recently, he's been somebody who I've been inspired by. Him and his wife have been doing some amazing things. And so for me, I want me and my husband to be along the same lines for sure.
Cool. What was were there any interview questions that you had during your time that just totally threw you for a loop? And you're like, I have no idea how to answer this. And you just bullshitted your way through it.
I think one of the questions I got asked in one of my interviews was like, what's my experience like working with engineering? And I had kind of sort of worked with engineering before, and I didn't really see why it mattered at the time. And I definitely BS'd my way to that one, if I could recall.
Do you remember what you said?
I cannot remember. Remember we talked about it. Like, I remember being like, I got this question. I think I don't really know what he's looking for, but I answered it.
The way I would coach you on that in hindsight is engineers do not like to be told how to solve a problem. They want you to bring them problems and they want to figure out the solution. Yeah. So you're like, hey, I want people to click on this button more often. Mm. That's okay. But if you tell them you want to make it blue or you want to make it pop like this, don't tell them that. Talk to them about the problem that you want to solve and let them come to it. And like we talked a little bit about micromanagement earlier on, I have found, and I don't want to stereotype all engineers, engineers are problem solvers. Bring them a problem, they will solve it.
Yeah.
And also prioritize, because everybody is coming with everything. And if you can present data to them factually, logically, rather than I just want this built, that usually resonates well. And you will be dealing with more engineers at Facebook because about a third of their employees are engineers.
I know. And now I can't wait about the time.
Yeah.
It was just like, I don't know how to answer this question. Honestly, at the time, I knew I had a good capacity that this person was not looking for. So I tried to kind of finesse it a little bit, but I think at the end of the day, and this is probably in the middle of my job search journey, I probably just should have said I hadn't That's something that I definitely, like, if I don't know something, I definitely got into the habit of just saying, I have done it before, but here's how I would handle it. And I realized that that's just okay. No problem.
Humility and honesty is okay. Like, people will smell the bullshit if you start spewing.
Especially in tech.
Yeah, partly in tech. And I think partly because the people that you're interviewing with have interviewed so many people because they're hiring so much.
Yeah.
So very last question. What advice would you have either given yourself 8 months ago as you started the journey, or for my listeners as they're trying to enter into, to get into a FANG or to get into a great tech company? What's like one or two pieces of advice that's actionable that they can start doing themselves?
I got a couple, but I'll try to keep it short. The first thing for sure is, as you're interviewing, you will face rejection. At the end of the day, there's so many factors. They may hire somebody internally. They probably weren't really looking to hire externally anyway, but they just put it there out of courtesy and maybe interviewed one or two people and then you didn't get it. There's so many factors out there, and just not taking it personally and thinking about rejection more so as redirection, I think has truly helped me, especially as we got into the latter couple of months. That's been huge for me. Informational interviews are crucial. Blind applications, like, that's something I barely did. Or if I didn't really care about the job, I would do a blind application. But if I really cared about it, I was going to find somebody who did what I wanted to do, or find somebody who may know someone, or just somebody who works for the company and learn more about what they do, more about the company, which can a lot of times turn into a referral, but sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. But all you're doing is increasing your network and learning more. So informational interviews is definitely huge. Definitely keeping a brag sheet. I don't know if you remember, Alan. I know for me, in the very beginning, I know I did a lot of really great stuff, but I couldn't remember because I didn't write them down. I couldn't remember like how to quantify it. Like, what was that percentage again? Like, I had to rack my brain to remember these things. Don't put yourself through it if you don't have to. Like, for me, going forward, even if I'm not interviewing, I'm going to be taking stock of all the things I'm doing, the impact that I'm making sure I'm quantifying it so that when the time comes to talk about it, I know I can recall it and I don't have to worry about racking my brain 5 years later on what I did 10 years before. And I think the last thing is just being able to have your elevator pitch, being able to tie in your strengths and how it applies to the role. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, I guess I should have known, but you didn't say, hey, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. But being able to do it with the crack of the whip, because you just never know who you're going to be talking to. You never know when you're going to have to sell yourself. And I think that is a crucial part of the job search journey, being able to have your elevator pitch and be able to sell yourself whenever you need to.
Awesome. Those are fantastic tips. And one other tip I will leave you with, and I don't know if I told you this before. So you got this great job at Facebook. Get that job description if you don't have it. Print out a PDF of that. That will help you enhance your resume for your new role. They basically wrote your new resume for you, and you can build out some of the impact that you will deliver there. But take that, add to your resume. You don't need to be looking now, but you should always be looking, because if Google comes on your door, knocks down on your door, and they're willing to give you $50,000 more at a higher level, not to say that you should jump right away, but there's no reason why you shouldn't listen. And Facebook helped write your resume for you with this fantastic role that you got. I'm so happy for you. This is why I do what I do. I always knew that you would succeed.
Wow, what a pleasure having Anyel on the show today. You see, Alan's got some pretty exceptional guests on this show. Would you agree, Alan, of course?
I'm a little bit biased, but yes, I would tend to agree with you there, Russ.
Just a little. Thank you for listening to the Sick Podcast and hanging out. Connect with us at sickpodcast.com. That's SYCK. Please leave an audio message that we can use for the podcast, and Alan can get started on steering your career with Kadima. Alan, what's in store for the upcoming episode?
We have a great episode. We're going from Meta here to a former Googler. He's been at Google. He's been at some other companies as well. But I met Anthony Hernandez, who's coming up on the next episode at Google. And he'll share a lot of sick advice about his adventures.
Awesome. Cool. Big tech. Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and you are gonna love the next one.